Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce now. Sorry. You're on live radio, you shouldn't really eat. I'd like to introduce you now a writer and poet, been touring with John Peel's Shed. This is John Osborne.
Been touring with a show called John Peel's Shed, not with his actual shed. Hello, I thought that I'm going to do some poems for about 10 minutes. I thought that because Robert Llewellyn is here after the break, and he's one of those very kind of pro-technology guys. He's got like a computer, and he knows about electricity and that kind of thing. I would do some poems about kind of how things were better in the old days. Like, I'm not really anti-technology, but I quite like things kind of how they used to be. So this is the first one. It's called Pages from CFAX. Because CFAX doesn't exist anymore. I think that's a shame. I spent many happy hours just watching the football scores change on teletext. I'm worried about the future, I say, racing a car around a Scalextrics track. Twitter trends with man worries about the future. What a loser, some kid replies. I spend the rest of the evening correcting the typos on his website. There are too many television channels, I think. Watching a channel devoted to people discussing whether there are too many television channels. I just like things better in the old days, I tell the studio audience when I'm invited onto the show. A small section at the back applauds. These are my people, I think, waving. People who can't get to sleep at night, so read pages from CFAX as hot chocolate warms on the hob. There are too many blogs, I write on my blog. And immediately it disappears. Like when a little girl says, I don't believe in fairies. And at the bottom of the garden, a family of fairies grieve their mum, taken so young. We are all on life support machines, I tell the studio audience, stomping on a MacBook. We are being drip-fed by these tubes, having God knows what pumped into our veins. Theatrically, I unplugged the USB cables I had carefully placed in preparation for the analogy. Let's all quit Facebook, I type as my status updates. And we all count down together, 10, 9, 8. And after 3, 2, 1, it's like when you've been in a traffic jam for so long, you say right, and take off your seatbelts, turn off the engine. Thank you. I'm writing a book about seasides at the moment, which means I've been travelling around to lots of different seaside places, which is quite cool. And every seaside that I've been visiting, I've been writing a poem about. It's like a non-fiction book, but also I thought it'd be quite cool to have poems that accompanied it, which means that I've done some quite cool things. I was at the Isle of Wight last weekend to have a guided tour of the Saucy Postcard Museum, and I've met a retired lighthouse keeper, and I went to Beachy Head to meet a guy who's set up a chaplaincy team to patrol 24 hours a day to help kind of rid the kind of reputation it has as a suicide hotspot. As I've been seeing really fascinating people and writing poems about it as well. So like the idea is we'll have a map of the British Isles, and all around the coast I'll have a poem for each place. But I'm quite lazy, so I've not done that many. Writing poems is boring as well, so it might not get done. But this is about Hastings, where I was a few weeks ago. It's one of my favourite seaside places. I was walking along the seafront, and there were these two kids, maybe like 15, and they were busking, and they were amazing. So this is about them. No, it's for them. Dear the boy and girl busking on Hastings seafronts, please promise me you will be a famous band. We need this, the three of us. You for Jack Daniels in hotel rooms, me so I can tell anyone who will listen that I saw them before they were famous, busking on the seafronts. I'd remember how I was looking for a postbox and then just stopped in my tracks when I heard them and felt compelled to give them all the loose change from the zip bit of my wallet. That I've never given money away before or since, but I felt so drawn towards these two, who I could tell weren't brother and sister or boyfriend and girlfriend, just the only two in their class with vinyl collections. They both had dads who liked Dylan, and my God, they were skinny. So dear the boy and girl busking on Hastings seafronts, please don't give up. Recently I read this book about a retired lighthouse keeper who said that every day he spent in that lighthouse he regretted not trying harder to be a footballer when he was younger. That he'd been strong and tall for his age and couldn't play a game without someone's dad telling him he should have trials with Villa or West Brom or Wolves. He lived in the Midlands, became a builder, started drinking. There were a few of us watching these teenagers busking in the rain, playing guitars, singing, and these were no dreary cover versions, these were tunes, good haircuts and an upturned trilby full of pound coins, enough to buy them a new amp. And when they were whispering to each other in between songs, making each other laugh, each one of us passers-by would have queued all the way through the winter gardens to have swapped places with them. Once I went to a restaurant in Weston-super-Mare and I left without paying. I hadn't planned to. At the end of the meal, I just thought, balls to waiting for the bill, and I stood up and I put my coats on and I strolled out like I owned the Southwest. It wasn't until I switched my bedroom light out that night that I realised that at some point I'd given up on life. And that's why when I saw this boy and girl busking on Hastings seafront, I couldn't help but picture the garage they rehearsed in. They'd practice every other Thursday, 7:30. Sometimes one of them would say, I've written a new song. And they'd sit down on the chest freezer and play it, while the other listened, sitting on a rocking horse that was in there for storage for some time it might be useful in the future. Thank you. Cool, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here as well. It's really exciting to see lots of people in a theatre. The last time I did a poetry gig, it was me and my friend Ross in Cambridge, and one person turned up. And we said, well, we can stand here and do poems at you if you want, but that might be a bit weird. Why don't we go to the pub instead? So she said, oh, yeah, we can go to the pub. And we did, and me and Ross sort of ignored her. We hadn't seen each other for a while. We just carried on. So this is called Our Waitress is the Employee of the Month. Her photograph is in the foyer, and I imagine her pretending not to be that bothered when it was announced at the team meeting, a semicircle of applause. But the next morning she'd have shown her mum the £20 high street voucher, and her mum will have said well done and meant it, because she knows it's important to appreciate the small things. And in town our waitress will have gone from shop to shop, content she didn't have to start work until 7:30 that evening, and trying on a maxi dress in River Island. She'd wonder whether it was for the time she'd helped an amputee cut up his food, managing to strike the perfect balance between being too fussy and pretending she hadn't noticed. She didn't even need to say anything like, shall I help you with that? It was just this intuition she never even realised that she had, and as she helped chop up his gammon and potatoes, he will have told her he was in town to see his daughter, who had just proposed to her boyfriend, taking advantage of the leap year, and he was so nervous he wouldn't get on with his future son-in-law. And our waitress would have asked if he'd like a dessert. And at first he'd have said no, but she'd have said, oh, go on, because she knows it's important to appreciate the small things. And she'd have smiled as he scooped up the last of his custards. Our table is ready. The four of us take our seats, and as she hands out the menus, puts serviettes on our knees, she must know that we know. We'd been in the foyer for so long, staring at her photograph, and I think, please, no one say anything. Don't let it be like the time we saw Dame Judi Dench get out of a taxi by the Old Vic and shouted, Judy, Judy, until she turned and waved so awkwardly. Let's just be grateful that we're being served by the employee of the month. And as she carries out our plates of sea bass, we know that if any of us start to choke on a bone, we will feel her arm around us. Thank you. I'm going to do one more of these poems, or that one at least, is from my new poetry book, which is called The New Blur Album. Hoping some people might be looking for it online and buy it by mistake. Be really disappointed, but too late. This is my last one. It's called Death, God, and the Universe. I'm stood on my balcony at midnight with a glass of Southern Comfort, listening to the super furry animals. But for some reason, I start to think of all the mistakes I made growing up. When I didn't turn up to my own surprise birthday party. When I missed an open goal when we were losing 1-0. When I promised Holly I would never let her down. I think of all the money I've wasted on boring nights out. When there were people in Rwanda scooping muddy water into their cupped hands. Pensioners shivering in their homes at Christmas. And I realised that life is too short to hate Neil Morrissey. Life is too short to watch Big Brother's Little Brother. When I was young, before I'd heard of the Beatles, before I'd even tasted a strawberry, all I wanted was to be that kid on a BMX, flying off the ramp, somersaulting through the air. But now I can't stop thinking about the things that I regret. When I lost £500 playing online poker. When I called my teacher Dad by mistake. When I reversed the car into the garage door, it's because I was so unhappy with death, God, and the universe. And it's important to have someone who will help soothe the pain of death, God, and the universe. So tomorrow I'm going to call some friends, invite them round. I'll cook them fajitas. We'll watch the mighty Bush. Because I don't understand why people spend time unhappy when Sarah Lee Gatto is 99p at Farm Foods and Hancock's Half Hour is regularly repeated on BBC 7. Because sometimes death, God, and the universe, all of it can stop still. And it is just you, on the balcony at midnight, with a glass of Southern Comfort, listening to the super furry animals. Well, thank you very much.
Brilliant, John Osborne. Thanks very much. And what a fantastic way to end the first half of the Reading Room Live here at the Lincoln Performing Arts Centre. We'll be back in 20 minutes with Robert Llewellyn. We'll see you then.